If you've ever played Advance in any capacity, you have heard the term Superman or Superman team, the same thing. Even if you haven't played Advance, if you've been around competitive Pokemon, odds are you have heard this term at least once, at least in passing. So what is a Superman team for the uninitiated? Well, it originated in Advance, and it is a team that has at least 4 Pokemon immune to spikes. The name comes from the original Superman team by Veteran in Love, one of the most celebrated, influential Advanced players of all time. And the idea is as follows. In Generation 3, spikes are the only entry hazard. And you don't have to rapid spin or prevent the hazards from going down, or limit how many layers they get, or anything like that, if you are simply unaffected by them. You know, Zapdos and Flygon and Skarmory and Aerodactyl and Gengar and what have you, they are not going to be affected by spikes whether there's 1 layer or 1,000,000 layers. So the idea is that you have, rather than trying to limit or get rid of spikes, both of which can be kind of difficult to do consistently given how powerful Skarmory is in particular. Rather than that, then you instead fly over the spikes, like Superman. So that's the general gist. And Superman used to strictly be this one team created by Veteran in Love, or VIL, a set of 6 Pokemon which we will be examining shortly. However, over the past, let's say, 4 years, then the concept of Superman teams has evolved beyond just, oh, it's the Superman team, and has more become, oh, it's a Superman team. There are more types of Superman teams now. So that's what this video will be going over. So the concept of Superman teams has been pretty popular even beyond just Advance. In Advance and Black and White and Oris, it's definitely been tried. And you know, there have even been some passing stabs at it in GSC and Sun and Moon that I've observed. I've tried myself in GSC. It's hard in that tier for sure. And it's had varying degrees of success in those tiers, especially if you've ever played Black and White and gotten into a Sand Spikes Magikarp ward, then that's basically the same idea. The idea is that spikes are incredibly powerful, so this applies to Advance and those other generations. The idea is spikes are incredibly powerful, so if I can be less affected by the spikes than my opponent, then that's a big advantage. If I have 4 or 5 spike immune Pokemon, and my opponent only has 3 or even 2, then that's incredible because I don't have to prevent them from getting up spikes at all costs. I just have to be able to exert enough pressure with my own, and I'm starting out with a big advantage, so it's not hard to do. The one drawback of Superman teams is that by limiting yourself to flying or levitating Pokemon, and in this video we're strictly going over Gen 3, so you know, no Magic Guard to help you out, which makes it a lot easier in Gens 4, 5, 6, and on occasion 7. But yeah, when you're limiting yourself to flying and levitating Pokemon, then you are generally opening yourself up to some weaknesses, some pretty big weaknesses, because while a lot of the best Pokemon in Advance are immune to spikes, that's part of what makes them so good, in addition to their stats and typing and move pool. But when you do that, you are inevitably going to stack some weaknesses to some powerful types. For example, when you stack a bunch of flying types and the few Pokemon that have levitate, then you are not going to exactly abound in ice resists. You know, best you're going to do is neutral, and that can still hit hard. Not a lot of water-resistant spikes immunes either, and the few that are destroyed by electric. So, for example, something like an offensive Starmie can be really dangerous, or something like an offensive Suicune. The good news about this is that, first of all, these kinds of teams, by stacking these types of Pokemon, then they have a lot of offensive pressure. And the second good news is that that same principle applies to them. When you have a stab rock Pokemon, right, like Aerodactyl on this team, then Aerodactyl's counters are not going to be flying type. It's a similar idea with Zapdos, which is also on these types of teams. When you have an electric or a rock type, DD Tyranitar, another example, then those Pokemon's counters are generally not going to be immune to spikes. Therefore, whenever they switch to their counter to your Pokemon, then they are going to get buffeted by spikes and worn down really quickly, and then you will be able to outlast them and finish them off throughout the game. And generally, you have a lot of pressure without being passively pressured yourself. So that's the general idea. And it works well. I mean, this isn't exclusive to Superman teams either. I mean, this is the backbone of a lot of different types of teams that run spikes and a certain sweeper. I mean, Zapdos spikes or Jolteon spikes, electric spikes. Gengar is another good example. Arrow, of course, DD Tar. And conversely, that's why something like Heracross isn't very good alongside spikes, because spikes are not going to help your Heracross get past Salamence or Gengar or Zapdos. So that's the kind of synergy you're looking for here. Abuse the spikes as much as possible while being immune to the opposing spikes yourself. And it works. So now we're going to get into the history of how these Superman teams have been built. Is that an ad? That better be an ad. Okay. And by doing so, we will explore the possibilities of Superman teams. I don't think that this is a solved... Well, I don't like to use the term solved in Pokemon anyway. I think it's very silly. But I think there's a lot of room for innovation within the Superman archetype. So, the battle we are watching is... if you've been paying attention, I will leave the link to this battle in the description. It is one of my favorite battles of all time. I can watch it every time and still appreciate it. So it is between G80 and Goofball, two of the best Advance players ever. They played when Advance was the current gen, and the current gen, Advance being the current gen, is also when the original Superman team by Veteran Love, Vil, was made. And believe it or not, that was before my time. I know it's tough to fathom such a concept, but there was a time even before my carcass started breathing. So, luckily I'm a Pokemon history nerd. So, we will go into the... Now, I'm not going to go into the history of before my time, the mid-2000s when I wasn't COPPA legal, but I am going to go into the history of how Superman has evolved during my time playing Advance, which is a decade now. So, I do know enough of my Advance history, though, to know that this team that we're about to look at, posted by Gene, the alias of G80, was the original 6 Pokemon as Veteran Loves, and there have been allusions to various sets that have been changed. For example, I think there was like a very fast Skarmory. Yeah, see this post by Shrapnel, Superman that's been around forever, revamped a few times. Original one, Screech Flygon, Max Speed Toxic Charm, that had all the success. Updated one suited to the current meta. So the movesets themselves aren't as important. Like, I think today, if you were to use Superman today, which you definitely can, then you would probably use a Pursuit Tyranitar. So it's not so much the movesets necessarily, as much as the Pokemon together illustrating the general concept. So, another relic from the old days, an arrow lead. So, a couple things. When Advance was the current gen, it was played on Net Battle, and Rapid Spin was a lot less prominent back then because it was blocked by Substitute. So you had things like Sub Flygon, Sub T-Tar, and Sub Skarmory on certain teams, and they would block Sub. So things like Fortress were a lot less common, and you could deal with Claydol pretty easily. So that's obviously another factor why this kind of team looks so different from how it might today. In addition to metagame developments, of course, since we have a very active Advanced player base constantly pushing the tier forward. However, there is a balance to be struck. We're always pushing the tier forward, but not unrecognizably so. Like, I genuinely believe that this, the original 6 Pokemon on Superman can still be used to great effect today. I was using the original 6 Pokemon from Superman a couple years ago, and it was still really effective. Just because, you know, the years might go by, but Tyranitar will still be Tyranitar, Skarmory will still be Skarmory, Aerodactyl will still be Aerodactyl, and that's the core offense of this team, and you're still going to be... point being, the little things might change, and as I said in my previous video, then little changes can go a long way, but the core concept is still the same. Okay, so Aero Lead, Sub-Punch Tar, another relic. I will link this post in the description too. It's wonderful. I used to learn a lot from it. Here's Flygon using Jolly. And this is still effective today for offensive Calm Minders. Alright, so here are the relics. The true relics that I would not recommend using anymore. Rest-Talk Swampert and Rest-Talk Skarmory. Now, these sets were really good. However, in 2015, it was discovered that Sleep Talk is actually kind of terrible in advance. Basically, if you rest and then you use Sleep Talk and then you switch out before burning a turn, then you still have 2 turns of sleep left. You can't Sleep Talk freely anymore if you're going to be forced out afterwards. There are some exceptions, like some players like Crocoon still, simply because it's a lot harder to truly force out, so you can use Sleep Talk more freely. I mean, if you're not switching out, then you can use Sleep Talk, rest and Sleep Talk to your heart's desire. But you can't Sleep Talk and then switch out, because then you're just never going to wake up. So, however, this set, I really, really enjoyed Rest Talk Skarmory back in 2013. The medieval times. If those are the medieval times, I don't even want to think about what Net Battle would be. But point is that these sets would not hold up today, I don't think. But yeah, it's still a Skarmory. I mean, you change the Rest and Sleep Talk to Taunt, or not. Actually, don't even bother with Taunt, because you're not trying to taunt other spikes, aka half the use of Taunt Skarm. Toxic, Drill Peck, Protect, whatever. Make it fast, HP Ground, if you really want. And then Swampert can be Protect, and then, whatever filler. So, and then, of course, the third Sleep Talker, Zapdos. Probably the biggest definitely the biggest casualty of the Sleep Talk nerf. However, Spadev Zapdos is still a great, great Pokemon, even without Rest and Sleep Talk. Some people use Mono Rest, some people don't even bother with Rest and just enjoy the extra bulk. So, you could even make the Zapdos like more offensive, faster, modest, still give it special bulk, because you're going to need it to help fend off Starmie. But for the most part, another thing, I would probably go with Careful Skarmory and Toxic now to help with Starmie as well. And then I think you're generally fine. Some Spadef EVs on Pert wouldn't hurt. But yeah, the general idea. Another thing I want to mention, this is really important. So when we say Superman, we say at least 4 Pokemon that are immune to spikes. 3 Pokemon is definitely helpful, and I will be going over that later. But 4 Pokemon that are immune to spikes. However, there are going to be 2 more Pokemon that are, at least 2 Pokemon that are affected by spikes. And, generally, you're not going to get better than... Generally, you're going to have 1 bare minimum that is affected by spikes. Full levitating is just generally not a good idea, because then you don't have Tyranitar. And when you don't have Tyranitar... when you don't have Tyranitar, you don't have Sand, and at its core, then Superman is a classic example of a TSS team. TSS is another household term in Advance. Almost pretty much as iconic as the term Superman. It stands for Toxic Sandstorm Spikes, and that's a big reason why T-Tar is so good in Advance, because it brings the sand. So. Generally, it's hard to fit, that generally, it's hard to fit 5 flyers or levitators, or let alone 0. I mean, definitely possible. This is why we want this style to be experimented with, but generally difficult. And a big reason is that you got to have that T-Tar. So Now, I do want to mention, so here's the point I was getting at. Both the Pokemon on this team that are affected by spikes, Tyranitar and Swampert, that they are immune to Sandstorm. And this is really key, because a lot of the best Pokemon in Advance, Blissey, Celebi, Suicune, they're great, but being affected by sand and spikes is a huge blow to their viability. Snorlax is like the prime example of something like that. So, now, I'm not saying this is a hard rule. We're definitely going to be exploring some alternatives that break this rule later, but it is generally advisable. Generally advisable that you have your spike weak Pokemon have the sand immunity. All right, and I will go further. And if one of your spike weak Pokemon absolutely has to be affected by sand, very rare exception, but still happens, then it needs an instant recovery move. No rest, there's nothing else. You have to have Recover or Soft Boiled, more or less. And that pretty much gives away what it's going to be. But, yeah. No Wish Protect. Yeah, so no Vaporeon, for example. Wish Protect is going to be incredibly exploitable on a team like this, because the whole idea is to minimize how much you care about spikes. So that's another reason why this team has such great longevity. It's not just, we're immune to spikes. It's also 5 Pokemon immune to sand. So, and the one Pokemon that is affected by sand, Zapdos, of course, is immune to spikes. So you are never getting affected by both sand and spikes. And best of all, with Skarmory, Flygon, and Arrow, you have 3 Pokemon that are not affected by sand or spikes. So in longer games, you are really sticking around and you are really putting a lot of pressure on the opponent. So, yeah, of course, this is not a hard rule. Obviously, you're going to have to experiment a little, and go out of the ways of the pre-established norms if you want to have some sort of breakthrough. But the general concept of this team is still very, very solid. And obviously, you're going to want to update older teams to be optimized with present-day optimized movesets. But I mean, at its core, it's still it's still a Swampert, it's still a Zapdos. So another concept I want to show that this was generally a popular playstyle among good players in general. So the reason these G80 and Goofball brought the team against each other in they didn't have identical lineups exactly. They had moveset changes, of course, and a lot of those small, as we were saying earlier, those small moveset changes go a long way. But it was an incredibly popular team. And I also really like this team that G80 posted. He also had 4 Pokemon immune to spikes. He's got, on this team, he's got Gengar, but still Zapdos. He's got a CB Ments and a Skarm. And here he's got a Blissey, and then, of course, a Swampert. So, yeah, 4 Pokemon immune to ground. Spikes is really strong, and Rapid Spinners are generally not good. So that's the... we've definitely made some strides in the rapid spin department, or in the spike limiting department, in the advanced metagame since then. But that's another reason why the trends come and go. But at its core, Skarmory is still an incredibly strong Pokemon, so you're gonna have to deal with spikes somehow, and this is just another way of dealing with spikes. So after Advance was reintroduced into Smogon Tour. So we had the Superman team during the current generation, when Advance was the current generation, and then Diamond and Pearl comes out, and then Advance kind of takes a backseat for a while. It was still played, but not as prominently as before. And this game, actually, the Battle of the Week, was played not long before Advance's reintroduction to Smogon Tour. And that reintroduction to Smogon Tour in early 2011 is when I started to play Advance. And there was Superman everywhere. He was a really good team. So, yeah. So then we had Superman, and then, of course, some advanced players tried to, they said, oh, this Vil guy's got the right idea. This immune to spikes thing is awesome. So there were some experiments in the way of that. I remember McMegan had a really cool team with Articuno. Articuno, before the Rest Talk nerf, was really great with a set of Ice Beam, Roar, Rest, and Sleep Talk because it fit in perfectly with the goal to have all your switch-ins be spikes weak, and therefore be able to abuse the spikes as much as possible while being immune to spikes yourself. And it caused a lot of havoc, and it had longevity, of course, with Rest Talk, and then, of course, that was destroyed, sadly. But, yeah, so there was that, and then there was Vertigo's team, I remember, which had Danilo used it a lot, and that was, I think, the first team I saw that had 6 spike immune Pokemon. I think Danilo brought it to SPL, actually. It was Skarmory, Gengar, Flygon, Zapdos. Actually, no, I think it was 5. Yeah, Skarmory, Gengar, Flygon, Zapdos, Rest Talk, Will-O-Wisp, Haze-Weezing, and Blissey. Yeah, there was definitely a Blissey there. And so remember that rule of if you're gonna have a spike immune or if you're gonna have a spike weak sand affected Pokemon, it better have instant recovery. And then I said soft boiled and gave it away. But yeah, that's Blissey for you. And here's why Blissey is worth the trouble. The reason is that, as we established earlier, then sometimes this team can struggle with special attackers. You know, your Starmies and offensive Suicunes can sometimes be tough to deal with. And Blissey's walling capability is so head and shoulders beyond everything else that it can be justified, especially not just because it heals automatically, but also because it takes so little from the attacks it switches into. So it can definitely be worth it, and it also has Wish to further reinforce your defenses. And yeah, it can be tough in a spikes-heavy game that goes on for a while where it's constantly being forced to heal, but it's still very helpful, and it still will hold off the opposing Zapdos so to give you time to get your threats in the game. So the Blissey rule is definitely the main exception. Yeah, so then Superman still started being tweaked afterwards. That Vertigo team didn't really take off. I really liked McMegan's Articuno thing, but that didn't gain popularity either, sadly. And so that was the Blissey exception. Yeah, this G80 team, I think nowadays you would definitely use Wish Soft Boil instead of Wish Protect. But similar idea. That's another old team from mid-2006, my goodness. Anyway, so yeah, then in 2015 we had the Mechanics Discovery, and players were still using Superman because it's just a great team. Matter of fact, in SPL 2016, then Vil himself brought his original Superman to an SPL game against Triangles, and he didn't even take the Rest Talk off. And because the team is fundamentally solid, because it uses fundamentally good Pokemon, it was still good. I mean, this game, then Triangles brings a Moltres, which was very under the radar back then. And that was an example of, yes, this team can sometimes struggle with certain offensive threats, but also with how close the game wound up being, then it's an example of, wow, this team really can play around more or less everything. And G80 even alludes to it in this write-up. You really need Arrow to clean stuff up late game. So we're not gonna hyper analyze this game. We'll just go through it real quick. But the general idea: see, there's the Zapdos absorbing, and Skarmory gets the spikes, and yeah, you're definitely gonna want to have some sort of plan for Fortress now, as Triangle's fearlessly, not scared of the Fire Blast from Flygon. But yeah, Flygon, spikes. Oh, there's a Zap Cannon for you. That's funny. Anyway, so the basic idea: look, hovering above spikes, Aerodactyl, massive threat. Even without spikes in this team is scary. So, yeah. I think it was PP stalling the thing or something. Anyway, so yeah, that was 2016, and then 2016, 2017, I was still using some Superman. I actually experimented with Celebi in the Flygon slot sometimes, and I don't think it's Blissey tier. I liked it because I liked Heal Belling for my Res Zapdos, more or less, but I definitely preferred the Flygon version. simply because it's more in Spike's games and just in general the physical presence helps overwhelm with Arrow late game. But the general core of the team was still really solid. So I mean, there are experimentations to be done with like Gengar over Arrow and whatnot for spin blocking, which, definitely feasible, and I like that variant as well. But generally, same idea. So people, like including myself, were still using Superman, or various like small tweaks on Superman. It was still the same core team, core idea. Moveset tweaks, occasional Pokemon tweak, still the same. The first big development on a massive scale in terms of developing Superman beyond just the original Vil team, I give the full credit to this for Astamatidos. So we're going to switch to this World Cup game. MBV stands for My Bloody Valentine, great band. And it was an alt I used because I was really listening to them a lot back then. And this was a World Cup game I had against Golden Sun. Now, I said I give full credit to Astamatidos because he was exploring a new way to reliably make Superman work. The Vertigo team, the Articuno stuff, that was, nice, but not really super spammable, let's say. Not something that a large portion of the player base is going to want to use. And then it got killed by Rest Talk anyway. So what Asta was doing was finding a way to make it still defensively sound, update it a little bit, and still make it offensively threatening. So I really liked what he was doing, what he showed me, and I asked if I could bring it to a World Cup, and we made some small changes. And then he's such a nice guy. He was like, "Oh no, this is half your team now," which is nice, but he was being too nice. It's fully his. So here is the team. Now the original team that I used here is not like what the iconic version that is still used today wound up being, simply because my Flygon was choice banded. It was meant to be, oh, well, I have Flygon, but now I don't need Arrow because I have choice band on it, and we're going to make up for it in other ways. Oh, and that's an offensive Zapdos, does a lot. So Spikes, there's the Gengar, of course, to block the spin, and then there's the Fear of the Pursuit Tyranitar, another new wave metagame thing. So then I get a crit, and the game itself doesn't matter because I switched thinking if there's no switch here, then there's no ground immune, so I'll be fine anyway. And I wanted to catch a Gengar. So yeah, the idea here, there's your T-Tar. It is Pursuit Tar. That's another update. Some people were saying, oh, let's Pursuit Tar and Superman before. And that's good here, but let me try again. It was good before, but now it's really kind of essential because Will-O-Wisp Gengar is everywhere, and you can't Rest Hog Zapdos anymore, and there are no real other switch-ins. And the last Pokemon on the team, which we're actually not even going to see, because CB... Oh, and there's the bulky Flygon. So yeah, CB Flygon just kind of cleaned up, because I think Golden Sun's last was Metagross or something. Okay, the point is, this was the first game, and it wasn't really an example of the team as much as when it was first used, because it's very rare that you have a direct... It's somewhat rare that you have a direct reference point for when something was really first used. So the last Pokemon here is Defensive Jirachi. Another invention of Asta's, independent of this team, but if you ever see someone call a Jirachi set Astarachi, then they're referring to Wish Protect. Is my volume up? I can't hear this at all. That's way too quiet. We're switching. We're going ahead. Anyway, so if you ever see someone refer to Astarachi, that's Wish Protect, Body Slam, Fire Punch. Defensive Jirachi that he came up with. Before that, Jirachi was not used as an all-encompassing wall in the way that it has come to be used in the last 6 years or so, because Danilo made it popular. So this was the new core. Matter of fact, this was the new standard 6 for Superman. The Flygon eventually went to, lefties defensive sets. I remember UD liked Adamant on his. It was still a defensive Flygon, but it had an Adamant nature to hit a little harder. And some Zapdos were more Spadefs. I personally always liked Modest on this kind of thing. Modest with Bulk, and then Skarm with Skarm, Pursuit Tar, Gengar, and then the Astarachi last. So let's look at how this standard comes to be in the Showdown team builder. So it follows the same Superman structure, or rather, it follows the same general outline of Vill's original Superman in terms of how it deals with the passive damage. So you have two Pokemon affected by spikes, Tyranitar and Jirachi, and neither of those are affected by sand. So you don't have any and since you have two Pokemon affected by sand on this team, Zapdos and Gengar, but both of them, of course, hover above spikes. So again, you are never being affected by both sand and spikes. Now, you also have Skarmory and Flygon, who are immune to both. So there's a ton of longevity here because Protect Defensive Flygon, one of my favorite Pokemon ever, and that has ridiculous amounts of longevity. You think Swampert is hard to kill for, you know, DD Tar, Aeros, Metagross stuff, then Flygon is just horrible for them to deal with because they can't even, you know, throw spikes down and get it chipped and nullify its leftovers. And of course, it doesn't have a steel resist, but that's why you have Zapdos, Jirachi, and Skarmory backing it up. So, and of course, it poses a threat in the end game. And then in the end game, then you are putting enough pressure on the special wall so that Zapdos and Gengar can clean up. So it's definitely more of an offensive lean, especially since, first of all, your Jirachi is a reliable special wall, and you it's more reliable than, you know, Spit Out of Zapdos in the past. It can really just sit in front of a lot of special attackers, and what's more, it has Wish to keep everyone else healthy. So you are making up for the lack of rest talk by reliably Wish passing to everything. And you are, of course, exerting a ton of synergistic pressure while having a ton of longevity to go the distance and longer games. So this team became, or this set of 6 became the standards, and I really give full credit to Asta. He kept experimenting with it. I really enjoyed this team as well. I made my own spins on it, of course, but yeah, so Asta, you know, first there, in terms of Superman, first there was First there was Vil, who made the Superman team, and then there was Asta, who said, you know, now there are more Superman teams. Obviously, on a wider scale. Obviously, it had been attempted before. I remember, you know, there was another Vertigo team that actually did have 6 spike immune Pokemon. It was like Claydol and other stuff, but you know, nothing that really took off. I mean, this was the metagame for a solid year, and yeah, I still think this team is, and this structure is very, very, very solid. Just like I think, I used a lot of very there, but just like I think Vil's original Superman set of 6 is solid and can be tweaked, and yeah, I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to try to stop there. So then we're going to move to 2018, so a little bit of tweakage here, so because Linear is using the same idea, Superman, but there he's got the Blissey. And he's got Moltres, because Moltres had been taking off, and wouldn't you know it, Moltres is also spike immune, so it can do the exact same thing as Zapdos. It can do that whole, I'm immune to spikes, and my switch-ins are generally not, so I will be able to outlast them, especially because Will-O-Wisp is dangerous, as we know, with Gengar, and Moltres synergizes beautifully with Gengar, so it just all comes together wonderfully. So yeah, so same idea. There's bulky Flygon being an absolute menace, even in the face of CB Tar. And yeah, look at how much it's healing. So same idea, spikes, and outlasting. And of course, Pursuit Tar even alongside Bliss, just because it's helpful for cleaning up in the late game, that force damage. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention this because his last is, in fact, Gengar. So, yeah, it was kind of funny how Superman kind of blended, you know, the past with, oh, we're going to sub, and then we're going to deny Rapid Spin that way, and a lot of people don't even bother bringing Rapid Spin because it's so easy to mess up. and instead they were kind of forced into this whole, we have to be immune to spikes to not get destroyed by them. Oh, look at Flygon withstanding arrow right to the very end, by the way. And then, you know, in the PO and the early Showdown years, then everything was spikes, Gengar. Oh my god, it's so good, it's unbeatable. And that kind of found its way to Superman, because part of why Gengar is so good with spikes is because it's spikes immune itself, and that kind of kept going, and you see how all these little trends from different eras coalesce into one greater whole, and that's the metagame for you. It's really, really wonderful to behold. So, yeah, so this was one way of doing it. The one thing that, so you have Blissey here as a special wall because, again, instant recovery, so its walling capability is so ridiculously good that you can justify taking sand and spikes, especially because of how some special attackers can be threatening to this kind of team. Then Golden Sun became well known for this team he was using, which was basically the original Zapdos, Flygon, Astarachi, Gengar setup, except he had Moltres over, what's it called? Over Zapdos. That had its own strengths and weaknesses, and that became kind of his signature team for a while. So, and this is a really long game, so we're just going to have to skip through it. But yeah, that was the idea. Still one of his most well-known teams, even though it's years old. I see a lot of players in Advance very focused on what's good right now, currently. And obviously there are trends that are really strong against the teams that are most popular, used most popularly. But I want new players especially to understand that yes, yes, there are trends, and you know, certain things are, you know, certain teams are just not prepared for, you know, Subcomine Jirachi right now. But at the same time, just because a team is old does not necessarily mean it's bad. Especially in a small old metagame like Advance. I mean, what, did T-Tar suddenly stop being good all of a sudden? Things like that. So that's what I'm saying when I emphasize the idea that you know, Vill's original set of Superman 6 is still good, or the team of Astas from 2017 is still good. That kind of thing. So yeah, this was a very gritty game by Golden Sun. Anyway, so then Linear also made a team with both Moltres and Zapdos. He decided to drop Gengar, and we are going to use not the game he used it in, but a different one, a game in which Markop used it against me. And the first benefit of this is that, first of all, it has me in it, which is always a plus, I assume. And the real reason is that it illustrates some really important concepts that I want to emphasize in relation to Superman team styles and dealing with spikes with bulky teams as a whole. Okay, so bunch of stuff happens. I get my Skarmory in, spikes. I try to trap his Skarmory, blah, blah, blah. And he just, you see what he's doing here with this Blissey? He's not trying to get his own spikes. He is trying to weaken my Skarm at all costs. And that is because he does not care about my spikes. Also, he's trying to catch my Magneton, getting greedy against his Skarm. But also, by wearing down my Skarm, he will be able to reap the benefits with Flygon and T-Tar later on, because his T-Tar winds up being choice banded. So that'll be really helpful. And of course, Blissey will have an easier time. And here's the big thing. Blissey can afford to seismic toss Skarm a bunch of times. On most teams, you really can't, because if you're giving Skarm 3 free layers and your team is affected by it, then you're just, you know, asking to lose. But on this team, you can afford to make plays like this, and that's what's really one of the many things really interesting and unique to the Superman style, that you can afford to do this. On any other team, then this would, you know, just be a waste, and you would just go to your own Skarm and get your own spikes and whatnot. But here, then you have this opportunity to make this offbeat kind of play and have it actually not just be strictly inferior, not just strictly hoping, well, I hope my opponent messes up. It's actually a good tactical move. So, see, Skarm's already down to very low health, and, you know, the 3 spikes, And if you're asking, well, BKC, why are you, letting Skarm go down, even if you think, is this a Superman team? Well, because having 3 spikes against T-Tar and Blissey is still very good. If this is, of course, the weakness of Blissey, yeah, it's still really good on these teams, but in a game like this where there's lots of spikes going around with sand, then it can be kind of exploitable, and I want to exploit it. Especially because I can, still maybe pass a wish to it with my own Bliss. And wearing down T-Tar is really good as well, because I have a Moltres of my own. So, that's one concept, in addition to Wish Blissey being incredible. On both sides, he even has a Wish Bliss of his own to keep every one of his Pokemon healthy. I don't remember if Linear's original had a Wish Blissey, or the Choice Band T-Tar he wound up having, but again, options. You don't need to run Pursuit Tar there, and CB Tar is a really interesting option to really force the issue more instantly and make everything else on the team more scary. So, still regret not going to Magneton there, like a fool. Anyway, so I'd have to deal with 1 spike. But now here's another concept I want to illustrate. So I have on this team 3 Spikes immune Pokemon, and I generally think that if you are running a defensive team that doesn't have Rapid Spin, or just generally doesn't have a really good plan of attack against Skarm, if you're going to be playing defensively, let's just say that, then I think it is really helpful if you can get 3 Spike immunes in there. Now, you don't need 3 Spikes immunes. I think you can definitely get away with 2, but you really have to be careful because the standard team of T-Tar, Skarm, Gengar, Swampert, Blissey, Filler, a lot of time that last slot goes to something like a Dugtrio or a Starmie, and that can be nice, but then you have a team that doesn't really pressure opposing Skarm as hard as it could, and thus you can really get into trouble in longer games when you're just not hitting Skarm hard from most directions. It's just phasing you out over and over. So I generally think it's really nice if that last slot is the Zapdos or the Moltres or the Aerodactyl, giving you that longevity and the threat in the long game. So, and this is an example here, because if I just had, Mence, and my Mence here is actually, this is not a Superman team I'm running, by the way, not even close. Because I've got a Pokemon that loses health in sand. That's the one thing you'd never have on a Superman team, a Pokemon that loses health in sand. I mean, even your Blissey is going to, heal off that sand damage. Even if it's hit by spikes, it's never going to be hit by sand and lose another 6% from spikes. At least Mence isn't getting hit by sand and spikes, but, you're not going to, you can't protect against it and have it lose health. You can't protect against Blissey and have it lose health, like you can against Salamence, and Salamence isn't healing. Obviously, I have Wish on my Blissey to try and offset that because it's a wonderful combination, but even though this is not a true Superman team, the idea of stacking the Spikes immunities wherever you can comes in really handy here, because otherwise, look at all these Pokemon destroyed by Moltres I have. Skarmory, Metagross, Magneton, and then you've got your, HP losing Mence. If that Moltres has Protect, then it gets even worse, and your Spike and Sand affected Blissey. So it can get really hairy, even if you manage to switch into the Fire Blast. Look, Blissey's forced to Soft Boiled here. It's going to be in a really bad position next time. And Roar again, and now Skarmory comes back in, and you can see the threat that is being posed here, because constantly flirting with death, no matter what you do. And it's not like if I stay in and Drill Peck the Moltres on a Roar, then I'm suddenly out of the woods either. So back to Blissey, and here's the Roar, and here is where that 3rd Spike immune comes in handy, and not one that loses health in sand. So my old Moltres, same idea. So of course Markop has more Spikes immunes than I do, but I also have the option of am playing 6-5 up because I've gotten rid of his Skarm. So now he and I have the same amount of Spikes immunes left. So these are, I'm afraid this is going to start sounding like bragging. This game is well over a year old now, and that's not my intention. My intention is more to show that it's not just about building a team fully immune to spikes. It's it's incorporating the general idea into your teams wherever you can. it's generally really helpful, or at least minimizing the impact of both sand and spikes. Like for example, offensive Celebi is great, but sand and spikes come in the picture, then it's not as effective. Whereas Jirachi is still threatening even if you hit it with spikes because it still heals up in sand. And that can be really important for late game sweep attempts where every bit of health counts, that kind of thing. And for teams that play defensively, which is going to be most teams in advance, because even offensive teams are going to have to take a step back, at least for a turn or two. And because you're not going to be able to stay in and outrun and OHKO everything and just bombard the opponent with sweeper after sweeper most of the time. So it is important. Skarmory is going to get a layer on you. Even if you have all these special attackers, it's going to get a layer, and that layer goes a long way. And the abusers of that one layer are terrifying. So being able to limit it in some way is really helpful. Now, obviously, you have other options of doing so. You can have a team that pressures it with taunts and stab electric at every corner. And you can throw on an offensive rapid spinner, that kind of thing. But it's limiting if those are your only ways. So to simply just be able to deal with the spike, like simply not have your back broken if you can't get rid of the spikes, or not just can't get rid of the spikes or don't even want to include such a measure on your team, this opens up your opportunities in team building so much. So even though this is not a true Superman team, it still has a lot of measures that help deal with spikes. I mean, obviously, and Magneton is kind of an anti-spikes measure in its own right because it limits the amount of opposing spikes that go down. But at the same time, you're not just going to be able to run Magneton and then a bunch of Pokemon that like Skarm dead, because as physical offense has shown us, if you do that, then you're still going to get torn apart by a lot of stuff with spikes down, with just that one layer. So being able to have a bunch of Pokemon that don't mind that layer at all is really helpful. I mean, three is a real sweet spot because there it's still reasonable, and you can still have a lot of flexibility in that vein. So anyway, same idea here. Own Roar, and so on one hand, that turn was also a great encapsulation of this style because, on one hand, look at Blissey getting roared out with 3 layers of spikes and sand. On the other, here comes Flygon, and Flygon gets a bad rap, but I really think, as this video has shown, it's got incredible longevity and is really useful on this style of team and this kind of battle for this exact reason. No sand, no spikes. It's threatening in return with just one layer of spikes. So, there you go. And so now Blissey comes in, heals, stuff happens. He's fearing toxic. So, then the rest of the game is not really about the Superman thing. I just wanted to show off or display or demonstrate those concepts. There's not much to show off. If anything, it's showing off how I didn't play this one perfectly. But this team, and I really like Markop's changes to it, the CB-Tar especially. And it's really, interestingly enough, I was considering bringing my own Moltres Zapdos team against him. I think I mentioned that in my SPL video from last year. But sadly we did not get such a matchup. But idea remains. Hovering above spikes, really good. So that's more or less everything I wanted to say about Superman. Those are pretty much the states of Superman as we have seen them before. And are there more options? For sure. Let's go into the team builder and take a quick glance. So pretty much everything with the spikes immunity. So Claydol, does that have a place on Superman stuff? It can. It's also nice because you can run a Claydol that doesn't need to rapid spin. So you have some opportunities to run unexpected moves like Ice Beam. God, this is really quiet. Ice Beam, you definitely run Explosion. It's also immune to sand as well as spikes, so lots of longevity there. And it can be used kind of like a Flygon in that sense. So definitely some options there. Gyarados doesn't really, I don't know. I don't think Gyarados is really worthwhile on Superman stuff. I mean, I would love to be proven wrong. I really would. This is where, I say, please go out there, experiment with Superman styles. Don't even limit yourself to the 4-spike immune thing. The 3-spike immune thing can be really helpful. Maybe you incorporate a Superman-esque twist into your offense teams where you are less... Oh, UD had a great offensive team like this. I should mention that. He had an offensive team with Salamence, Gyarados, and Weezing. And that triple spike immune made it... I would recommend looking up his game against Callus from SPL 9. So that's from 2018. So go to the SPL subforum, go to the replays threads. I think it's on the second page at the time of this video. And look up his game, UD versus Callus. And that game is a great example of how the concept of floating above spikes, flying above them, supermaning them, like one Soulja Boy did many, many years ago. Doing so can be really helpful even on offense teams because it makes it so much harder. I mean, you can... A lot of the problem offense has a lot is that you'll get your big hits off, but that one spike can go such a long way. And when you are not resistant, immune to the spikes, or have a lot of Pokemon that are immune to the spikes, then you limit their impact. You limit the value that they get out of staying in, taking that big hit, and getting the spike up. Because, well, I have 3 offensive threats that just don't care about this. And then when your spikes affected Pokemon are things like T-Tar and Metagross, then you are even less affected by the spikes in total because you are healing them off, or you're just not taking further damage from sand. Obviously, this isn't perfect because the whole point of spikes is that, and spikes offense is that, Jesus Christ, that is quiet. The whole point is that you can stack them with Pokemon that are directly, with Pokemon that are countered by Pokemon weak to spikes. Like, you can't just say, oh, let me throw on my Spike Immune Starmie counter. It gets kind of tough that way. But you can definitely, so you do have to watch out for that, and, that's why Snorlax is so frustrating sometimes to use. But if you can deal with that, and there are many ways, then you have a lot of opportunity both in the team builder and in the battle to exert more offense. So I think Gyarados is definitely better on offensive teams that try to say, all right, I'm not going to mind your spikes, and I'm still going to pose a threat. Gyarados has some good sets that can do that. As for defensive spikes, Superman stuff, the traditional form, I don't think there's really... a long time ago, Danilo was using offensive Superman. I think he had like Snorlax over Skarmory, and it was actually pretty good. It was a solid team. So, that's another approach you can take. But for traditional spike Superman, as we've been going over in this video, a true Superman on an offensive team is going to be really rare. But, that 3-spike thing, that just makes such a difference. Going from, 2 spikes immunes to 3 is just a world of difference. Then, yeah, Gyarados is definitely good. Not so much for spike stuff, though. Moltres, we know. Salamence doesn't get used so much on true Superman stuff, and I think it has a place, for sure. It's fast, it's strong. I mean, it's as fast as Flygon. It's really strong. It's got some great resistances. And, I mean, it's weak to, rock and... ice, but so is Zapdos. So it's Intimidate is always helpful, especially because if you go back and watch the G80 versus Goofball game, you see how terrifying Arrow is, and yeah. So late game, another Pokemon, not even a special sweeper, another Pokemon that has more or less spikes weak checks, and thus being able to slow it down in the late game in any way you can is really helpful. So Mensa's Intimidate could pay dividends there. And yeah, so Arrow, really, really good, of course. So yeah, Mence definitely could have a place. Oh, it also has Wish. It doesn't even have to go full defensive. It could, but it doesn't have to. It can run Offensive Wish. It can run Offensive Roar to further soften the field for its own partner, Aerodactyl. So... yeah, I don't think there's really... Oh, Charizard. Yes, Charizard definitely could do it. If you can use Moltres, then you can definitely use Charizard in such a slot. The extra speed can be really helpful, especially because certain offensive Calm Minders like Celebi and Jirachi can be obnoxious sometimes, so Charizard definitely has an advantage in that sense. So yeah, definitely give Charizard. I would love to see Charizard Superman. Give that a try. Moltres is great, of course, but Charizard definitely worth it. Dragonite, not so much. I think it's just going to be a worse Mence. It doesn't have the same defensive presence. I think if you're going to use Dragonite on offense, then you should use something like a not a true Superman thing. It's going to be more that 3 spikes immune kind of deal. Like if you have like a CB Knight Scarm Arrow, like this one team had, that was really, really strong. And that kind of lets you run CB Mence without needing a Magneton because you can Focus Punch Scarm. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah, so that's more of the 3 spike immune thing being a big difference. Anything else? Oh, Jumpluff, definitely. Not a true Superman thing because it doesn't switch into much, really. But the 3rd spike immune can definitely be good on Spike's offense stuff. If you've watched my laddering adventures before, you know I've loved Scarm, Guard, Jumpluff. So that can definitely be really helpful. Anything else? Ninjask, no, because that's just for very, very specific offense teams. I guess it's on offense, the ground immune thing is not just for Spikes, but also for Dugtrio, and Dugtrio rips open a lot of offense. So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone in that regard. You are making yourself better against Spikes and Dugtrio, 2 separate threats, and sometimes they're paired. So it's something to consider. So for offensive stuff, with the 3 Spikes immunes, definitely. And when you go through the Pokemon list, you realize just how many Pokemon are affected by Spikes. And, not just Spikes, but also Sand on top of that. And then you realize just how powerful Spikes are. So that's why Skarmory is always amazing, more or less. Weezing, I don't know about Weezing on, like, defensive Superman stuff. I think it has a place. I think if you ran Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Paint Split, Explosion, a set I recently posted about on the forums, I really, really like that set. And I think on defensive teams, that can definitely work. That's the definition of a Pokemon that would work on a Spikes Immune kind of defensive team. Spikes Immune, Spikes team. On offensive teams, though, then you could definitely use a more offensive set, like the UD team I just mentioned with Gara, Mence, Weezing. So it's a fantastic Pokemon for such teams. So, yeah. You could also, Arrow on offense is really good. I wanted to mention that really quickly. So yeah, Weezing, and then we're kind of getting into the less OU viable Pokemon. We're not going to be using Fearow, and Spikes are really good in Advanced UU, but there's no sand, so they don't stick as hard. So Scyther, I really wonder if there's some use for Scyther. I remember Asta was messing around with that in like 2013. It's fast. But for now, we're going to skip over that. Solrock, Lunatone are like fun, but not really good. So we're just going to call it there. So those are your options. So I hope this video has given you some insight into the purpose and history of Superman. Oh, there is one more Pokemon I want to mention. Mantine. Yeah, Mantine, is it BL or is it UU? Or is it NU? Oh yeah, it's NU. Yeah, UD has used Mantine before because it is Surf, Toxic, Rest, and then like Filler. I think he used Protect. So it's basically it doesn't heal, but it doesn't heal like with the recovery move, and it has to rely on Rest. But it has Water Absorb, so you blank Suicune. And you're just general. Oh, this is the hardest Moltres counter in the universe because it doesn't care about Spikes. And you rest off Will-O-Wisp, and the Surf Toxic combo is always great. So yeah, Mantine. I don't know if it's like seriously good, but I definitely wanted to mention it just as an example of how you can get creative with these types of teams. I'm sure there's more stuff. I don't like Haze as much. It's hard to fit. I think Toxic Protect is just too good a combo. So this is the set to use, I believe. And although I'm sure it could be good for like offensive Calm Mind stuff. Anyway, yeah, for Superman, then you know the drill at this point, and I'm just going to stop myself from repeating everything. a million times. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you took something from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Go check out that G80 versus Goofball game. Links to everything in the description. Starting with this, it's still one of my favorite games ever. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you took something from this. And I will catch you next time.